Maria Cristina again, your Roman consul, and I'm here to talk to you about time travel again. Today we're going to cover Piazza Venezia, and it just looks like a boring, boring piazza, and you come with me and have a look at what you discover. So let's have a look and recap what we've done so far. If you look at one location in Rome without actively thinking of the different time periods, you will miss the depth of the experience and everything will appear flat. If you just see, for example, Piazza Venezia, you see a square. Yep, there are some interesting monuments on the sides. There's a lot of traffic in the middle. You might be a bit bored. You will need to peel off all the layers of time as you would an onion to truly appreciate Rome. And this is what we're going to do today with Piazza Venezia. Come along and have a look. So you will have to harness your empathy. In the previous video we saw how to do that, and we did it in a location that has changed very little over the past 200 years. Its shape at least, it's Piazza Navona. But today we're going to have a look at Piazza Venezia. It's changed lots and lots and lots. So not only your empathy you will need to use today, but also your imagination. So your imagination will need to recreate the scenes of a Rome that has disappeared, and Piazza Venezia and its surroundings have gone through massive changes in the past 27 centuries. So that's what you'll have to do today. Not only use your empathy, but also use your imagination to make up how the piazza used to be. So follow me today with empathy and imagination. This is going to be the plan. Part 1, we will show you some fun stories about the history of the piazza. We'll go backwards from today and back through the centuries. And then in part 2, we will recreate the scenes in your mind and you will relive them trying to imagine the people at the time. So part 1, history backwards. Part 2 is actually what you will have to do when you are in Rome on the piazza itself. This is the information leading you up to being able to do that. This is Piazza Venezia. It's a huge, massive roundabout. Is it just that? Or is it also a history haven? Let's have a look at the main roundabout. It's a huge, huge square with lots of cars, because streets from Piazza Venezia lead you to everywhere of importance. One street leads you to St. Peter's. One street leads you to the main station, Termini. One street leads you to the Colosseum, and also St. John Lateran, which is the main church of Rome, excluding St. Peter's. Then one street leads you to Piazza del Popolo. That's actually the main shopping street. It's called Il Corso. And then another street will lead you straight to the sea. So it is Rome's main roundabout, but is it just that? So if you need structure, we will pretend that Rome is built like an ancient Roman city in a grid. As we have seen, Rome is not truly built in a grid, but we can just pretend, and let's have a look at what happens. In ancient Roman times, the city was formed as a grid, and it had 2 main streets. The Cardo, which was on a north-south direction, and the Decumanus, that was the east-west main fair. Rome, as we have seen, does not have a rational orthogonal plan like Turin or Vienna or York, which were all founded by the Romans, but we can make do anyway. So this is the Cardo from north to south and the Decumanus from east to west. What did you find where the 2 streets met? You found the Forum. Let's have a look if this is the case in Rome. Let's find the Cardo and the Decumanus in Rome. The Cardo, I will show you on a map, that it goes from Piazza del Popolo in the north to Piazza Venezia via the main shopping street, to the Colosseum by the Via dei Fori Imperiali, through the Forum, to St. John Lateran, the main church of Rome, excluding the St. Peter's. And then the Decumanus, it will go from St. Peter's to Piazza Venezia and to the main station, which is Termini. Let's have a look. So you can see the Cardo from Piazza del Popolo, main shopping street, Via del Corso, Via dei Fori Imperiali, through the Forum, to the Colosseum, and down to the Basilica of San John in Laterano, which is the main church. And on the other hand, the Decumanus goes from St. Peter's through Corso Vittorio Emanuele to Piazza Venezia, Via Nazionale, to the Stazione Termini. The other main street leading from Piazza Venezia is this one not highlighted that goes south. This one leads you straight to the beach. Where do the Cardo and the Decumanus cross? In Piazza Venezia. From here you can easily get to the most important places in the city, as we have seen. What used to be the crossing between the Cardo and the Decumanus? The Forum. And indeed, the Roman and the Imperial Forum are right next to the Piazza Venezia. But Piazza Venezia is also a historical haven. Let's explore. Let's have a look at what happened this century. Just a couple of facts. International peacekeeping and national grave. You'll see why. This is the main monument that will take all of your attention when you are on Piazza Venezia. What is it called? It's got lots of different names. You are likely to go up the stairs and up and up and up until you get a lift at the back here, and you go up and you can find some spectacular views of all sides of Rome from up here. These are your choices of names. You can call it the wedding cake, as Romans often do, or the typewriter, another name Romans call that monument, or you can call it, its proper way, the Vittoriano, because it was a monument to Victor Emmanuel II, who was the first king of unified Italy. It's also the monument to the unknown soldier, and it's also very grandly called the Altar of the Fatherland, Altare della Patria. Who uses it? Well, the armed forces, who keep the flame alive. You will always find the armed forces there keeping guard to the unknown soldier. And then mostly tourists, both on the stairs and at the top deck outdoors to have a look at the splendid panorama, and in the museums and exhibition halls indoors, because under the stairs there's lots of different museums. For example, the Museum of the Italian Resurgence, which is the movement that led to the unification of Italy in the 1800s. So, armed forced tourists, does anyone else use this monument? Unfortunately, it has other functions. One of them, for example, let's have a look at what happened on the 12th of November 2003 in Nasiriyah in Iraq. A suicide bomber attack caused the death of 28 people in Nasiriyah, 9 Iraqis and 19 Italians, between Carabinieri, army and civilians. They were all participating in peacekeeping mission in Iraq. So on the 17th of November 2003, over 300,000 Italians came to the altar of the fatherland to farewell the 19 peacekeepers and civilians who passed away. The next day, which was a day of national mourning, state funerals were held in St. Paul's Basilica. It was an extremely emotional day, and people lined up from the night before and just streamed in for a whole day to pay their respects. So the monument has got lots of different functions. Unfortunately, some of them are less happy than others. A changing urban landscape. Piazza Venezia has changed massively throughout the centuries. So let's have a look. You think now it's a huge, big roundabout, but it didn't always used to be that way. Let's have a look from the top. we've seen that we can learn lots of things from the sky. Okay, let's recognize what this is. This is, quite obviously, the Colosseum. Then there is a main road that leads you straight to the altar of the fatherland, or the wedding cake, however you want to call it, and Piazza Venezia. This street is called Via dei Fori Imperiali, Street of the Imperial Fora, because on top of it there are the Imperial Fora, the Forum of Augustus, of Trajan, of Nerva. Down at the bottom, and of Vespasian, down at the bottom you'll find the Roman Forum. And you can find the street that cuts straight in the middle of it. Was this street always there? No, of course not. It wasn't. In fact, if you have a look at this semicircular shape, this is the Trajan markets, I mercati di Traiano. Well, we'll have a look at it in a second. Via dei Fori Imperiali. It did not exist until the 1930s. The whole area that is now taken up by that street was built up. There were medieval and later buildings, mainly homes, and churches and other public buildings. In the 1930s, Mussolini decided to erase what he called the defacement of the medieval and Baroque buildings, and he freed up all the monuments of the Roman Empire, all the Imperial and the Roman Forum. So, if you have a look in an old picture, you can see there is the altar of the fatherland here. There should be a street that leads to the Colosseum, but there isn't. And where are the Roman Forum? Where are the Imperial Forum? You can't really see much, apart from maybe a little bit here, and then right on the other side here. But here in the middle, it's all built up. So let's have a look at what happened. This is the Forum of Trajan today, the one we were looking at before, the semicircular shape. And now pretend you are standing right here on top of the semicircular shape and look towards the altar of the fatherland. As you can see, it wasn't all freed up as it is today. It was totally built up with medieval and later buildings. People lived here, one on top of the other. Imagine being one of the low-class residents. They all lost their old homes and they were relocated in new public housing in the outskirts of Rome. How do you feel? Who was that did that? Mussolini. He used to call, and it's quite famous in our tradition, the demolishing and healing pickaxe. So he started it and then got plenty of people that didn't have an easy way to demolish buildings. And so with the pickaxe, the whole area was demolished. And the street that goes from the altar of the fatherland to the Colosseum, now called Via dei Fori Imperiali, was opened. Okay, I will not ask you to imagine being Mussolini, but you can try if you like. So this disemboweling, he called it the disemboweling, happened. This is the altar of the fatherland, this is Via dei Fori Imperiali, which now leads to the Colosseum, but also on the other side, the street that leads to the beach. Now, he called this street, opened up, and he called it Via del Mare, way of the sea, and to the other side he called it Via dell'Impero, Street of the Empire. So the Imperial Forum and the Via del Mare were not the only places to be opened up. Right next to Piazza Navona, and parallel to it, Corso Risorgimento was opened up. If you are near Piazza Navona, you'll see there is a main thoroughfare with buses. That is Corso Risorgimento. It didn't exist at the time. Via della Conciliazione, which is the access way to St. Peter's Square from the river. I'll show you in a second. And all around the mausoleum of Augustus, which is now called Piazza Augusto Imperatore. And it's got little restaurants all around it. One of them is called Gusto, it's quite yummy. I'm going to show you the disemboweling that happened around St. Peter's. This is St. Peter's today. As you can see, right in front of St. Peter's, you've probably been there already, there is a street that leads you right to the River Tiber. That's called the Via della Conciliazione, which was the conciliation between the state of Italy and the Pope, which happened in 1929. Because between 1870 and 1929, the Pope was just a prisoner in his own home and didn't get out much. And the state of Italy had conquered Rome against the Pope, and so there was not much talk between the two. But in 1929, Mussolini made the so-called Patti Lateranensi, Lateran Pacts, and to normalize the situation between Italy and the state of the church. But look at what happened. All of these roads, the Via della Conciliazione did not exist. Via della Conciliazione was all built up with medieval buildings, getting to the River Tiber. And Mussolini arrived and thought this was not quite proper, it was not a good entrance to the Vatican. He had all the little homes demolished in the middle and opened up the monumental Via della Conciliazione. He did that a lot. So anytime you stand in a long, straight street in Rome, you have to stop and you have to think. This is not natural for Rome. Who did it? Why is this street long and straight? Rome was not pre-planned, so there is nothing long and straight that has been pre-planned. The historical center of Rome is mostly made up of lanes. Long, straight roads are not organic. They are an expression of power. By whom? Well, long, straight roads are a sign of power either by a pope king or by one of the first governments of unified Italy post-1870 or by Mussolini. For example, Pope Sixtus V created, and I will show you in a minute from up above, the Via Felice. He was called Felice, and he called his street Felice. From the top of Spanish Steps to Santa Maria Maggiore. Now it's got 3 different names, but it's one long, straight street. And it was made to join major churches to benefit the pilgrims who went to Rome and went from one church to the next in hope to get some indulgency for their actions. Another pope that was quite famous and created 2 parallel streets because he wanted to create a new area of power was Pope Julius II. You know Julius II because he's the one who commissioned the Sistine Chapel to Michelangelo. And I'm going to show you these 2 streets, Via Giulia and Via della Lungara, which are beautiful still now. And then Alexander VII, another one of the major building popes, he rectified Via del Corso, which was not exactly straight, it was very messy, to honor the arrival of Christina of Sweden. She was a Protestant royal who had converted to Catholicism, and then she moved to Rome and stayed there the rest of her life. So the popes really wanted to honor her, and they made some major changes to the city just for her. So let's have a look. This long straight street goes from the top of Spanish Steps all the way to Santa Maria Maggiore, St. Mary Major, which is one of the 4 main churches of Rome. Julius II wanted to build a new center of power, and he wanted to have a sort of quadrangle. He had the Via Giulia in his own honor, Julius II. And now you can go here, it's right at the back of the Field of Flowers or Campo dei Fiori or Palazzo Farnese, Farnese Palace. It's beautiful, it's got a few antique shops and quite a few beautiful buildings. But if you cross the road into Trastevere, you find a parallel to it. It's called the Via della Lungara. Again, beautiful buildings, palaces, spectacular Villa Farnesina and Palazzo Corsini you can go and visit. Also built much later than the Via della Lungara, this interesting structure here is Regina Coeli, the Queen of the Skies, which actually is the main historical jail of Rome. And it's in an area where most tourists will end up going, which is called Trastevere. Now, these roads were built for Giulio II, for Julius II, by an architect, which is one of the most famous architects. It's called Bramante, and he's the one who started rebuilding St. Peter's, or rather, tearing down the old St. Peter's to build up the new. And, yep, rationalizing the Via Lata, which was the old name for the Corso, the main shopping street, for Cristina of Sweden. So the Via Lata, or Via del Corso, goes from Piazza del Popolo up north, which was one of the main doors through which you got into Rome. And it goes straight down all the way to Piazza Venezia. So if you want to just have a look at the shops, just go in this main street, you'll find all the main shops. You'll find two other streets, Via di Ripetta and Via del Babbuino, that are another two main streets that together with Via del Corso form what we call the Trident. So if you ever hear anyone speaking about the Trident, il Tridente, this is what they're referring to in Rome. So it's like a trident, it starts from Piazza del Popolo and it goes out around Via del Corso. And this is one example of post the unified Italy, so post 1870. Via Nazionale, National Street, was built post unification almost from Piazza Venezia to almost Stazione Termini, and it's another major shopping street. What about the current administration? It's not quite strong enough to tear down buildings and building roads within the historical center, but there have been talks of ripping out the Via dei Fori Imperiali, which is the one that goes from the Altar to the Fatherland to the Colosseum, and expose the full archaeological area with the Imperial Forum and the Roman Forum. That would be terrible for Roman traffic, and it would be great for our appreciation of history and archaeology. It's mostly close to the traffic, so even today you can have a great time. You spend there quite a bit of your time in Rome. If you were in power, which road would you build? What would you demolish? You can tell me that when you come back from your trip to Rome, but if you've been there already, then feel free to email me some suggestions. I'll tell you what I would do. I wouldn't do this for practical reasons, but just for beauty. I would open a big square in front of the crammed Trevi Fountain. I don't know if you've ever been there. You probably have already. This is a majestic fountain, but it's sort of enclosed in a very small space around, with lots of other buildings around it. Pretty much you got the main fountain, a little bit of space around it where lots and lots of people are, and then you got buildings straight away. So that would be nice, a square there. Back to Piazza Venezia. Yes. Mussolini. Okay, Mussolini had his office. So as you can see, this is the Altar of the Fatherland, and here you've got the window where Mussolini used to give speeches from. So this is called the Palazzo Venezia. We're going to go back to it because it was the main building of the square for a long, long time. Mussolini had his office in this palace, and as you can see, the piazza was heavily patronized when he was giving speeches. In this speech, he was getting Italy to exit the League of Nations in 1937. So you have to try and be there and imagine being one of the patriots on the square at any of Mussolini's speeches, sharing his dream of grandeur, of making Rome the imperial Rome it had once been. You can imagine being on the square when Mussolini declared war in 1940 and all the emotions that would go through you. You can imagine yourself on the balcony looking down over the cheering crowds whilst you are declaring war. Opening up the piazza, let's have a look at what happened. You need to keep working your imagination. That's the most important asset that you've got today. So we are standing on top of the typewriter, the altar of the fatherland, and we are looking a little bit to the left. You have got, here is Palazzo Venezia. Incorporated into Palazzo Venezia there is the Church of San Marco, and right next to them there is the Palazzetto San Marco, the little Palace San Marco, St. Mark. But have a look, let's go back in time. Look at the Palazzetto San Marco. Where is it now? Okay, we're still on what would have been the altar of the fatherland, but it's still all built up around it. All this stuff doesn't exist any longer. It doesn't exist. This one, this one, this one. Now, have a look. Palazzo Venezia is right here. Here is the Church of San Marco with the 3 arches. And the Palazzetto San Marco is right in the middle of the square. What happened? Yes, by the way, it used to be the stables and the servant quarters for the main palace. So if you have a look while they were building the typewriter, you can see that the palazzetto, was right in the middle of the square. But look at where it is now. It's been dismounted and mounted back again further back on the square. So it was a traveling palace. Still have a look. Do we have a Trojan horse in Rome? What do you reckon? Have a look at the typewriter. Up on top of the typewriter, there is a monument to Victor Emmanuel II. This is the king who unified Italy. And he is he is riding a horse. Now this horse, it looks very small from far back where we are, but have a look. This is the inside of the horse when the horse was finally put together and put on top of the altar of the fatherland. The main people who built the monument and the architect and the people who actually made the horse had lunch inside the horse itself. This is inside its tummy. So imagine being one of the lucky few invited at lunch in the horse's inside. What happened to the piazza after Rome was conquered by Italy in 1870? Like most streets and piazzas which had religious names, and this was Piazza San Marco, it changed its name to a secular one. Piazza San Marco became Piazza Venezia. There's another very important street just off the piazza. The street that connects Piazza Venezia to St. Peter's was, and still is, one of the major roads in the city. It was used for papal processions, and it was very importantly called the Via Papalis, so the Pope Way, the Papal Way. As Vittorio Emanuele II became king instead of the Pope, the street followed suit and became Corso Vittorio Emanuele II. So it wasn't called Papal Way any longer, but Corso Vittorio, so first the King Way, if you like. The new secular national government changed the names of many, many streets and piazzas and so on. So let's have a look at what happened pre-Italy, when Rome was still under the reign of the popes, pre-1870. Whom did this palace, which is on the corner of Via del Corso with Piazza Venezia, belong to? We are standing on the altar of the fatherland. Here is Palazzo Venezia on the side with the balcony where Mussolini used to give speeches. Now this palace, as you might read here. It's called the Palazzo Bonaparte. It belonged to Napoleon's mum. Imagine being Napoleon's mum on the balcony, watching life go by. What was the yearly event she had the best, absolute best seats for? I'll give you a hint. It's something similar to the Melbourne Cup. Yes, you guessed. It's a horse race. The race of the Berber horses. During Carnival, it was a race that used to go from Piazza del Popolo up north through Il Corso, so the shopping street, to Piazza Venezia. That was the finishing line. The horses had no riders. The race of the Berber horses was really very popular. Here you can see the start of the race and lots of different paintings that depict either the start or the finish of the race, and then the horses had to be grabbed in Piazza Venezia and made to stop. Here we're at the start of the race in Piazza del Popolo. So imagine being dressed up in fancy carnival clothes and waiting for the horse you placed your bet on the Piazza Venezia. And then celebrating as it comes out of the Corso first. But how did the piazza look at the time of the Berber horse races? Did it look like it does now? Let's have a look. Imagine you're coming out of the Corso. This is what you would have seen. So you can find on your right, Palazzo Venezia, right in front of you, which now has been moved, the Palazzetto Venezia, the Palazzetto San Marco. It's not here any longer, it's behind the main Palazzo Venezia. In front here there is now the wedding cake, the typewriter, the altar of the fatherland, which is not there yet. And this palace, well, this palace was too much in the middle of the squares. It's been demolished to make space. And in fact, you can find some of the frescoes from the inside of this and other palaces that used to be on the square in a museum that is called Palazzo Braschi. It's right next to Piazza Navona. If you go inside, you go on the first floor and you will find the reconstructions. The frescoes have been taken off the walls before the palaces were destroyed, and they've been recreated, they've been put on new walls in Palazzo Braschi for you to admire. This is what is in place of that palace now. So it's a sort of a twin for Palazzo Venezia. It's the Palace of the Assicurazioni Generali, like General Insurance of Venice. And it's very similar in style from the Palazzo Venezia, but it's been built in the 1900s. What other fun celebrations happened around here apart from the Berber horse race during Carnival? When you are in Piazza Venezia, I want you to think about all these fun things that happened there, and that will give you a different experience rather than just seeing a big roundabout. So this was the greasy pole of plenty. It used to happen on the square of the Campidoglio. So they would just put up a really, really long pole, or even a tree like in this case. It was all greased up, and up at the top it used to have big hams or other yummy things. So all of the young men used to try and get up that pole and get the rewards from the top of the pole. Huge, big, massive festival. It still happens in a lot of villages around Italy to this day. L'albero della cuccagna. Have you ever drank from wine fountains? Well, it's a way to celebrate. So really powerful people used to celebrate with wine fountains. They would give wine fountains, put them in front of their palaces for everybody to enjoy. So, for example, in 1758, to celebrate the election of Clement XIII, two wine fountains were placed in Piazza Venezia on either side of the main door of Palazzo Venezia for the crowds to enjoy. in another little square, in another square right next to Piazza Venezia, it's called the Piazza Santissimi Apostoli, very saint apostles. A white wine fountain and a red wine fountain were used for the jubilation of the Colonna family throughout the centuries. So just imagine yourself with a big mug, just going and getting a mug full of wine from the wine fountains. Let's have a look at Palazzo Venezia. We said already that it's the palace where Mussolini had his office, but it's a very special palace. Not only because it's one of the very first Renaissance palaces built in Rome, but also because it had many different passports. It's not the usual palace that just belongs to somebody in Rome and that's it. It belonged to different countries and it was the embassy. It served as the embassy of many different states. So throughout history, it belonged to the state of Italy, current state of Italy, Austria, as in the Austrian Empire, the Napoleonic Kingdom of Italy, the Venetian Republic, and the state of the Church, which is quite interesting for a palace. So this is Palazzo Venezia today. It's a museum and it's a library for archaeology and history of art. It's a treasure trove for anything related to archaeology and history of art in Rome. It's also a museum if you go upstairs. Now, the changes of ownership and nationality, let's have a look. During the Ventennio, which is the 20 years in which fascism was in power in Italy, it was the siege of Mussolini's office. Before that, in 1916, during World War I, it was repossessed by the Italian state from the Austrians, who had inherited it when they conquered the Venetian Republic. Although during the time they had it, during Napoleonic times, Austria had to temporarily give the palace to the Napoleonic Kingdom of Italy, but then got it back. The Venetian Republic received the palace from the Pope King, from the state of the Church, and made it its embassy. The Pope still kept use of part of the building as the residence for the cardinals that had their siege at San Marco's church, which is part of the palace. But there was a lot of conflict within the palace because when the relations between Venice and the state of the church declined and then broke down in 1711, it was like an estranged couple living under the same roof. The rooms of the palace were divided in a forced architectural compromise. It was enemies living under the same roof. Even before that, Palazzo, which was called the San Marco, but now it's called Palazzo Venezia, was the residence of Pope Paul II. Here we are at the very beginning of the Renaissance. A palace worth of a Pope King. It used to be just a modest medieval house, which was the residence of the cardinal appointed to the Church of San Marco. But Cardinal Pietro Barbo, who was an exceptional collector of bronzes, gems, coins, silverware, became Pope as Pope Paul II. He built a new palace at the very beginning of the Renaissance. It was 15 times the size of his old house. You can have a look at the palace from the outside and you'll find a lot of reminders that Pope Paul II was from Venice. You can find lots of these plaques. It says Paulus Venetus. Outside, it looks like a fortress, more like a medieval palace than a Renaissance one. But inside, it's a heaven, and you can have a look at some parts of it, not at all of it. I strongly suggest that you go and visit it. It's a beautiful palace. What is left of ancient Rome on the Piazza Venezia? Well, we have seen something already in the previous modules, and in the middle of the square we know that there is the Athenaeum of Hadrian. To the right of the wedding cake, if you look at the wedding cake to its right, you'll find the lower class apartment buildings. They're called the insulae. And diametrically opposite, on the other side of the square, under Palazzo Valentini, at the back of the Assicurazioni Generali Palace, you find the domuses of the wealthy. They might have been senators, or anyway, they were extremely wealthy ancient Romans. You can go and visit all of this. The Ateneum of Hadrian, we saw it in the previous modules, so I'm not going to go back to it. But basically it was a forum for scientists and philosophers and poets to tell everybody else about their theories or their poems. The wealthy domuses under Palazzo Valentini, and you can go there and see how rich ancient Romans used to live. You can imagine being one, and they recreated everything with a beautiful show of lights. You can also float over the living areas and see where they had their swimming pool and where they had all their toiletries. Or you can imagine being a slave polishing the floors of the beautiful domus. Not everyone had the luxury of living in that sort of style, so the less wealthy lived in insulae, which were apartment blocks. You can visit other insulae, other than this one that I'm going to show you now, at the Roman port of Ostia. It's less than an hour out of town. It's a beautiful place, and you should definitely go there if you've got a chance. This was one of the bedrooms. It would be shared by many. Would you sleep here? It used to be much better looking at the time, but still you can see the dinginess of the place. This was the ground floor, much lower than the current ground floor, of course, and you can see down at the bottom, in front, there used to be shops, and all the shops had a mezzanine level where the shop owners used to sleep. This looks more like ground level today, but at the time it used to be the first or second floor or third floor. And the higher you were, the less wealthy you were, and the higher your risk of perishing in case of fire. So that was the first part. Now I need you to relive the history of the piazza with all that information. So this is what I want you to do when you are on Piazza Venezia. You have to strip the place bare and then fill it up from scratch. So you have to recreate in your mind a world where just the ancient Roman things were. So you have to think of the domuses and the insula and the Ateneum and spend a minute or two just imagine the bustling life at the time. Then you can recreate ancient Rome in your mind with open shops on the ground of the insula and kids running all over the place and slaves carrying out their chores and matrons having their hair done in their beautiful homes and senators coming home after a long day at work or networking at the baths and philosophers discussing their theories in the Athenaeum. And then when you're done with imagining ancient Rome, you need to add the Dark Ages. So as the barbarian cut the aqueducts, imagine the wilting of the city from over 1 million people, even 2 million people they're starting to say now, to just about 20,000 people, and how this would have influenced the area around the piazza. Major families defended themselves from foreign incursions and competed for powers. Hence, there are lots of towers of fortresses. You can still see one of them, the Colonna family tower, next to Piazza Venezia in Via 4 Novembre, if you're there. You need to recreate this Dark Ages, so imagine a Rome with few inhabitants, mostly around the main churches. Imagine fields where there used to be palaces, as the ground level was higher than in ancient times due to inundations of the river Tiber. And there was cattle within the Aurelian walls, within the main walls of the city. The Roman Forum was called the Campo Vaccino, which means field of cows. The Roman Forum was called Field of Cows because it was a field of cows by then. And the Campidoglio, so the main hill with the main temples, was now called the Monte Caprino, Mount of Goats. So imagine the Forum as a field of cows and the main hill, the Campidoglio, as a mount with goats. Imagine being a rogue water seller. there was no more water from the aqueducts, so they really all needed water, which was either from wells or from it was decanted water from the Tiber. The better water was the one from the wells. The rogue water seller were shifting decanted water from the Tiber rather than the better water from the wells. Then you need to add Renaissance on top. So imagine being Pope Paul II from Venice, great collector of ancient treasures in the new era of possibility, building your residence, now Palazzo Venezia, 15 times bigger than your previous one. That looks medieval from the outside, and it looks like a fortress, but it's already Renaissance in style in the inside. You have to imagine the life inside and outside of the palace. So imagine being a servant in the palace, attending to the Pope Kings first, then to Charles VIII during his stay in Rome, then to the Venetian ambassador, to the Austrian one, and finally to Mussolini. Or imagine being a commoner, enjoying the wine fountains on the square, trying to climb the greasy pole of plenty, or trying to bring the Berber riderless horses to a halt after the races during Carnival. And then add unified Italy. Imagine being part of the Commission which decided on the new names of hundreds of streets and piazzas, from the religious ones to the secular ones. Imagine being the architect who designed the typewriter. It was called Giuseppe Sacconi, and he was trying to conceive a monument similar to an elevated forum or piazza, which was open to the people, and it was a symbol of a unified Italy and of the freedom of its citizens. Imagine the disemboweling, so living in medieval buildings on top of the Roman Forum, and being forced to move to the new council flats in the outskirts by Mussolini and his new project of reviving the empire. At the time, when most empires were starting to grant independence to their colonies, it was a bit late for empires. And then add the current tragedies. So nations standing together for peace. Imagine being one of the 300,000 people who went and paid their respect to the peacekeepers who lost their lives at Nasiriyah. Or imagine being one of their close relatives and friends. Do all these things while you're Piazza Venezia itself, and you will have a memorable and emotional experience. In this module, we've seen why Piazza Venezia is the central roundabout in Rome, how the piazza has lived lots of different adventures throughout the ages, and how we can harness our senses and our knowledge to relive different historical periods. Time travel is going to make your trip unforgettable. Now, please go to the stories below, download them, and discover the secrets of the elephant, yes, the elephant, from just behind the Piazza Venezia, and live an entirely different adventure. So wherever you are in Rome, remember to time travel. In the next module, we're going to explore how Romans reuse and recycle. See you then. Bye.